How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your August 2019 horoscope for Capricorn, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. We are ending July and starting August off with the new moon in Leo and Mercury stationing direct. Now, July was a really long month for you guys, so it's nice to be able to start August off with this refreshing new moon in Leo. At this time, we're going to be having both, or not only both, but the Sun, Mars, and Venus all in Leo too. And with this new moon, I think that this is just setting a nice little tone to give us a nice refresher and to start off the month really in a positive way and on a better foot. Now, while this new moon is in Leo, it is happening in your 8th house. And the 8th house is a really weird place. While you may have had Saturn and Pluto and the South Node and the eclipses all on your ascendant or on your sun, we get to bring the focus more to this 8th house area, and the 8th house has to do with death, and a big modern thing is like transformation. The 8th house is change. The 8th house is other people's stuff and other people's belongings, other people's money, inheritances, taxes, governments, and things like that. And so while you've had Mars and Venus and the Sun right here, I think this new moon going through Leo in your 8th house, if you're not dealing with, inheritance problems, tax problems, money situations, or things to do with your partner, I do like to use the 8th house as a really good place for change, because the 8th house, it's not in a visible spot from the ascendant. It's hard to really see. So it's kind of like having to trust what's going on through there and just trusting the process in order to get out of it. And so I think that this new moon in Leo is going to be kind of like an opportunity for you guys to really have more courage, have more of that, what's the word I'm looking for? Like audacity and that courageousness that Leo can represent when it comes to dealing with these challenges and dealing with these fears and these obstacles that you have right now in your life. Now, the next day on August 1st, that is when we're having Mercury station direct, and that's happening in Cancer in your 7th house. Now, Mercury has been retrograde in your 8th and your 7th, so that could have been, miscommunications or errors along with other people's money, like investments or inheritances or your partner's, belongings and things like that. However, as Mercury goes direct in your 7th house in Cancer, I think that this is about communicating and saying what needs to be said and addressing it in a way that is protected, in a way that's nurtured, in a way that is, just better for both parties involved. The 7th house is of relationships, and it's not only, like marriage and partnerships and stuff like that, but the 7th house is one-on-one individual relationships, period, no matter what. And so as Mercury goes direct right here, this is, if you've had strife or conflict with other people or individuals in your life, while Mercury goes direct starting August 1st, this is a good time to really, mend that gap or mend that bridge and fix that relationship and say what needs to be said. Then on August 11th, we're going to have Mercury go back into Leo. And now Mercury still won't be out of shadow yet, but as Mercury goes back into Leo, this is when the sense of communication, our ideas, how we're thinking, what our mindset's more approach to. Now that it goes back into Leo, this is where things get a little bit more grand. Things get put more in the spotlight a little bit easier. As well, with Mercury going back into your 8th house, this is putting a mercurial energy and putting a lot of distinction and clarity in like written word when it comes to 8th house topics like, death and taxes, inheritance, and all of that crazy stuff that it, rules. And while Mercury transits through there, this is about getting a better idea and a logical, reasonable sense of what's going on in that area for you guys. Also on August 11th, that is when we have Jupiter stationing direct, and this is really positive because Jupiter's been in your 12th house now this whole year, and that's not, it's like having a really good thing, but at a weird time, like you just miss it. Jupiter in your 12th house is kind of like a time where you're dealing more with isolation and alienation, but you're seeing the benefits of it, you're learning, you're growing from it. And as Jupiter's been in Sagittarius, it's been expanding this area. It's been showing you what you believe about it. It's been showing you what's possible here. It's been asking, what do you want to create in this area? And this is your 12th house of repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself. This is a blinding house. This is, about asylum. This is about isolation and being with yourself. And as Jupiter's been through there, you've probably had a lot more of abundance of alone time and self-reflection. And as Jupiter's been retrograde, this has been the time to ask yourself the questions and to get the deeper meaning out of all of this. And as Jupiter starts to station direct and move forward, this is where Jupiter starts to bring more of the opportunities and the benefits that come with dealing with that 12th house stuff. And so for the next couple months, I think you'll start to see Jupiter really starting to make some positive change on some underlying things like beliefs that you guys have about yourself that once implemented correctly, you'll start to see the benefits of as we move forward. Then on August 14th, that is when we're going to have Venus conjoining the Sun and going Cazimi. This is when Venus is the farthest away from us. She's on the other side of the Sun. And this is Venus in Leo. This is Venus wanting to bring value and attraction to things like Leo, of being in the spotlight, having visibility, getting the attention and the validation that we so often need. And as Venus conjoins the Sun, this is purifying Venus's energy and giving her a better sense of clarity and a better sense of direction. And as Venus is in the sign of Leo, I think this has a lot to do with acceptance of, being able to identify more of and being able to accept more of the value and express more of the value of. And this is in Leo, this is spotlight stuff. This is grand, hot, light stuff. And this is in the 8th house of, again, other people's money. This is about shared resources. This is about taxes and death and everything like that. And while Venus conjoins the Sun, I think that this is shedding a positive light on this area. And that can look a lot of different ways because not all of you guys are going through this very, specific circumstances that the 8th house brings. But I do think that wherever you do find how that, relates to you, that this is bringing a better, more positive emphasis to this area. And then on August 15th, the next day, we have the full moon in Aquarius. And this is happening in your 2nd house. So while we have Mars and Venus and the Sun and now Mercury all in your 8th house, there's a lot of focus on other people's money, other people's problems, what they have. This full moon is highlighting your 2nd house of your money and your possessions and what you have. And this full moon is just a good time to really realize, where's your money, what do you have and what do you possess and what are you looking to fulfill more of. Maybe you have something critical that you possess that you have that is going to help your situation with your 8th house with what someone else needs. But also on August 15th, we have Mercury finally leaving its shadow and starting to cover new territory while it goes through Leo. And while Mercury leaves shadow, we're finally getting over everything that Mercury retrograde brought to us, and we could finally get to move forward again, this time with fresher ideas, bigger ideas, more creative endeavors. And this is Mercury in Leo. This is thinking about things in a grand way. So while it is in the 8th house, that can be a very grand thing for you right now. I think the big thing to do is, use what we learned with this last Mercury retrograde and say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. Sometimes the lion has to roar and sometimes the lion doesn't have to say anything at all. Then on August 18th, that's when we have Mars enter Virgo, and we're going to have basically everything else enter Virgo by the end of this month. But Mars, of course, is the planet of action, of drive, of tenacity, what our intentions are focused on, what we are focused on. Mars is a malefic planet, so it does cause frustrations and anger and problems. It heats things up. And so while Mars is in the sign of Virgo, where Virgo is Mercury ruled, it's more, specific, it's more analytical, it's more focused on the details. Mars in Virgo can get a little bit more frustrated and a little bit more overwhelmed with the smaller, finer details that need to be, focused on. But while Mars is in Virgo, this is going to be a positive time to really push that drive and put that energy into the smaller detailed things that are going to help you, accumulate and build up in the long run. Mars is entering your 9th house, and the 9th house is all about spirituality, religion, far distance travel, foreign languages, and foreign cultures. Also has to do with publishing. This is a very spiritual house, and it's a house of growing, and a house of learning, and a house of experiencing. And so while Mars goes through your 9th house, I think this is about really understanding where to apply yourself, where to take action on the specifics, maybe where to learn or get, a little bit better, a little bit more. It's kind of like mastering your craft at something. And while Mars is in Virgo in your 9th house, this is definitely a time to focus on, what are your beliefs? What is your practice? What are you thinking? What are you believing? And Mars in Virgo is kind of like taking action on the smaller things that you believe, not so much the grand abstract stuff, but the more simple, reasonable, logical things that that you can take action on. And then on August 21st, that is when we have Venus enter Virgo. Now, Venus is entering its sign of fall, meaning it's kind of like Venus just doesn't have the energy to have fun. Venus is Venus is the planet of love, attraction. She wants to bring things together. She loves to have relationships and sex and enjoy other people and indulge in nice things. But as she goes into Virgo, this is where she can get overwhelmed with the specifics and, try to pay attention too much to detail, where Venus just isn't having as much fun as she'd like to have. However, Venus in Virgo is also beautifying and putting a lot of, aesthetic to the tinier details, to the things that, like I said just before, it's the tiny things that, once you do all those, they start to add up into a bigger, sum. And Venus in Virgo is kind of like starting to really see the value in the specifics and starting to see the value and bring in more value with being more specific, being more concise, being more detailed and logical. And while Venus is in Virgo, this isn't her favorite sign to be in. She will be in your 9th house of course, spirituality and religion, far distance travel. And so while Venus is going through here, I think this is more about, it's not about fixing everything with one blanket fix. Venus in Virgo is tending and taking care of the smaller things that can get often left behind. And while this is in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel, I think this is Venus trying to say, where can we get more clarity? Where can we be more specific? Where can we see things more, not necessarily ideally, but logically and with more rationale in this area for you guys? And then on August 23rd, that is when we have the Sun enter Virgo. The light is going away from the 8th house and going to your 9th house. And while we do have the Sun, Mercury will later be there, but Venus and Mars going through your 9th house, this is going to be more of a spiritual time, more philosophical, more expansive on your nature of what do I believe? Why am I doing this? And if I believe this, are my actions aligned with those beliefs? And I think this is going to be a really big time to look at that area for you guys and ask yourselves those questions. And then on August 24th, that is when we have Venus actually conjoining Mars. And while Mars is in Virgo wanting to, hammer out all the details and, be a, hammer, or what's nose to the grindstone, that's the word I was thinking of. And while Mars is in Virgo focusing on these specific tasks and details that it needs to get done, Venus conjoining Mars is kind of like bringing a little bit more fun to that. Venus in Virgo is kind of like, hey, all of these specific details are kind of annoying. Thank you, Mars, for taking care of them. But how can we make this a more enjoyable process? Mars is about frustration and heating up and anger, and it can be really frustrating when you have all the tiny little things not working, when you're just trying to get the big picture to operate smoothly. And so while Venus is conjoining Mars, I think this is about enjoying that process and, not getting caught up in the details and getting so lost in it, but still being able to have fun and bring value and, harvest that value out of it. And then on August 29th, we have Mercury entering Virgo, where Mercury now is entering its domicile sign where it rules. This is where Mercury can be specific, analytical, detailed, rational. Mercury in Virgo is thinking clearly, having better thoughts, being able to execute things in a more proper and more orderly fashion. And while Mercury goes through your 9th house, again, this is just a big focus on what your beliefs are. Where do you want to grow into? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to learn? And then by the time we end this month on August 30th, that's when we have the new moon in Virgo with Mars and Venus and the Sun and Mercury. So while all of these planets are in Virgo, this is a really powerful time, and it will also be trining Saturn. There's a lot of construction, there's a lot of building, there's a lot of just hammering out the details that are really going to grow into a bigger picture for you guys this month. But while this is in your 9th house, I think this is about getting out of your comfort zone and growing into something that maybe you've never grown into before. But this is, it's not about taking one giant leap there. It's about, taking one step at a time and filling in the blanks as you go along. And that's going to end up becoming a bigger picture as we move forward. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next month.